Hello, and thanks for joining us for this latest edition of In Conversation with the Daily Record. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by the Falkirk Chief Executive, Jamie Swinney. Jamie, how are you?
Doing okay, Scott. Thank you. Thanks for inviting us on.
No, thanks for coming on. It's been some season for Falkirk so far. Hopefully that will continue. But you must be delighted with the way things have gone so far this season.
Yeah, it's been carried on from what has been a fantastic 2 seasons, to be fair. The last 2 have been quite remarkable. This season takes it to probably 3 seasons now that would fit into that bracket. Top 6 is a wonderful achievement for the management team, for the players, and for the club as a whole. And an opportunity on Saturday to hopefully to progress to a Scottish Cup final, which really would be the icing on the cake.
Mm-hmm. Obviously it's been some story for Falkirk over the last 3 seasons. Realistically, when you got promoted to the Premiership, what was the goal?
So we budgeted on 10th. We felt that was, first season back in 15 years, that was a sensible budget. But we had a probably internal confidence and optimism that we could maybe do better than that. Now, I'll be the first one to say I didn't expect to be in the top 6. However, I did feel that we've got a lot of trust in this group of players, got a lot of confidence in this group of players and management team. So I wouldn't have been surprised if we better 10th. However, it probably went beyond my expectations to actually get into the top 6 and to do it pretty comfortably, actually. It's not like we left the last game of the season and scraped it in the top 6. We were a top 6 side for the last few months now, and obviously got over the line in pretty emphatic fashion, beating Motherwell at Fir Park last week. So I think we thoroughly deserve to be a top 6 side, and therefore it's huge credit to everyone in terms of what John and Paul have brought to the football club and that group of players, a lot of whom I'm sure we'll touch on it, but a lot of the core group of that players have now achieved not only 2 promotions but a top 6 finish, which I think is quite a remarkable thing for that group of players to have achieved.
When did you start thinking that top 6 was achievable?
I think when I review the season at the moment, the first 4 or 5 or 6 games, I did feel that we were almost feeling our way a little bit in the Premiership. You've got to remember, apart from at that point in time, Scott Bain and probably Scott Arfield, everybody else in the squads were either doing their first steps into the Premiership or had a little bit of Premiership experience but maybe not succeeded. So we had almost a full group of players who had never really played in the Scottish Premiership. And I felt it took us maybe 5 or 6 games to really feel that we deserved to be there and starting to show. Was there one point in time? I think that we went on a pretty good run. I would suggest, obviously, probably from October, November time, started to pick up some really good results. So probably from about then, it became, you looked around the rest of the league and you're saying, apart from maybe 1 or 2 away games at Celtic Park or Tynecastle, we had actually been very competitive in every game. So you were starting to say there's not a lot to fear in the league, and therefore it gave us a bit of hope and optimism to start to look up the way and not necessarily down the way. So probably after the first quarter, I feel we were starting to show that we were a Premiership side, and a good Premiership side at that.
Obviously, it's, as we touched on it, it's been a rise over the last 3 seasons, but you can see the fans and the town, they're all now very much buy into things, isn't it? It's very difficult. It was sold out signs all over the place at the Falkirk Stadium.
Yeah, the fans, I think we still had a pretty good backing in League One, despite the fact we'd spent 5 years in there. I think the numbers were still pretty strong. However, I've always felt that, and I've probably said this a few times publicly now, that outside the big city clubs, I've always felt that we're as big as there is in Scotland in terms of our fan base, in terms of the size of the club, the structure of the club. But you've got to prove that. You've got to actually earn that. It's easy to say that, but for now I look at it, and 5,700 season tickets this year. There's a potential that we actually will sell out the season tickets next year. I think 6,000 is probably an absolute maximum we can take, and I think we might actually do that next year. So it is the 7th highest in Scotland. It is the biggest outside. After Dundee United, it's the next biggest in the country, and therefore we're starting to show how big a football club the club can be. And the fans have just been a huge part of that in every way possible. We were fan-owned, so if you're fan-owned, you're fan-funded as well, and therefore everything that we've achieved with the fans. It's not been the best will in the world. It's much easier to be successful if somebody just writes checks and you overspend by 2 million, 3 million, 4 million every year, and somebody just keeps bankrolling it. That's a much easier route to go down than actually funding it yourself and doing it as a family club. So it gives you even more probably satisfaction doing it that way than having a sugar daddy funding it.
I mean, it'll probably give the fans, like most people at the club, are riding the crest of the waves just now. I mean, it's been great. 2 promotions, top 6, Scottish Cup semi-finals. I mean, after so many years in the doldrums, I mean, the club have probably been crying out for a spell like this, haven't they?
Yeah, and the club, if you look back in its history, the club has had good spells, of course it has. However, it had been so long since we had a good spell. You're really going back to probably we had a good period at one point for a couple of seasons under Peter Houston, but didn't quite make it to the Premiership. But out with that, the 12 to 13 years out with that were pretty bleak at times. Probably 6 or 7 of those years were serious failures in terms of the club's history. So you're going back to Yogi in 2005, 6, 7 when we were a good Premiership side back then, albeit we never made the top 6 at that point in time. So to 15 years later come back and make the top 6, I think just further emphasises how big an achievement it is when it had been so long outside the top flight.
I mean, obviously it's down to the success of the players on the pitch, but how big a factor has been the manager John McGlynn in everything that's happened in Falkirk of late?
Yeah, I think John and Paul as a management team are, to the absolute kind of best in the business. I really, really do believe that they're as good as anybody in the country. I think they're proving that now. If anybody had any doubts, I think that clearly the last 3 years they've proven how good they are. The fact that he has Manager of the Year awards on his cabinet as voted by his fellow peers, I think that's probably shows you how highly regarded he is by other managers. They have been instrumental in terms of driving the standards, in terms of creating a culture that has allowed us to be successful. And their attention to detail, their kind of obsession with football, their hyper focus on every single element of the game, I think comes to the fore when you watch us. Anybody that understands the game will watch us and see us as a very well coached side, and I think that is what we are. I think every manager in the Premiership would say that we're one of the best in terms of one of the best coach sides in the division. So I'm delighted to see John and Paul getting the recognition that they deserve now, because I think there was an element of when we won the Invincible League One season, there's a bit of a Falkirk should win League One, despite the fact that no other club outside Celtic Rangers have ever been invincible before. But there was almost a little bit of that should be what Falkirk do. And then we went back to back again. There was probably still an element of, winning the championship. Falkirk probably should win the championship. But I think when you keep adding to the success year after year, it's difficult for people not to recognise how good a job they've done. And I would also pay credit to the backroom staff as well beyond John and Paul, because we've recruited some really good people. I don't just mean football players, but really good people into the backroom staff. Bringing Steve McGlynn back in, I think was a really strong move for us. We've added to that in terms of Alan Fraser, our head scout, Matty Rowan we brought back from Rangers. We've continually added to our backroom staff. It was already really, really strong.
When you came in, was it in 2021, wasn't it? I think Paul Sheeran was in charge, wasn't he? And obviously, then Paul left. What made John McGlynn the outstanding candidate for Falkirk at that time? And obviously, I think he was managing Raith Rovers in the Championship at the time. So, how much of a persuasion job did you have to do on him to get him to drop down a league?
Yeah, so the club was in, if you remember, the club was in a really bleak place, actually. In fact, it was the season before was the worst season in the club's entire history. We finished 6th in League One, which was our lowest point in the club's entire history. We lost 1.2 million. We'd had a whole board resign, a high turnover of staff. So it really was in a pretty bleak place. And probably we hit rock bottom. I think I would suggest it's hit rock bottom. I remember the conversations at the time centred around, what is the style, what is it we're looking for here? And we were very clear about four or five things that we needed. One of which was we wanted a manager more than a head coach. That was something that was pretty clear. And a lot of clubs, obviously, these days do have the more head coach model, which tends to be a younger manager with maybe a sporting director. We also were clear we wanted a manager who had a good style of play. I mean, John and Paul have absolutely got that. A manager who had success at the lower levels, because we had to go and win leagues, and thankfully we managed to, John and Paul absolutely ticked the boxes for that as well. And we wanted a manager that was good with young players, because we felt that we'll restart the academy through time. We'll need to rely on younger players coming on loan. So once we got that person spec of kind of 5 key characteristics, I remember we spoke to the board, we had a chat around the various candidates. John and Paul became a real standout option at that point in time, because they did meet all those criteria. And thankfully for us, they seen Falkirk as a really good move in their career at a really good time, as they believed that Falkirk could be a Premiership club. Now, did they think they could do it, get us back to the Premiership as quickly as that? Maybe not. However, they did believe that they could stay with Falkirk and take us up to the Premiership, and the rest is history.
So, in terms of, when you stepped into the club, Jamie, as you came in from Stenhousemuir, as you said, the club were toiling a bit. What were your ambitions for Falkirk over the longer term? Although probably at the start it was more firefighting and trying to stabilise the club in the short term.
Yeah, to be really clear, that first 9 months to a year was extremely difficult. It was about genuine survival for the football club, because we were hemorrhaging money. We had a major disconnect between the fan base and the club. We were a very, very poor side on the park, and the culture within the club was one that wasn't a high performing culture. It was one of, probably after 6 or 7 years of failure, it got to a point where the culture wasn't great. So to try and turn all that around was always going to be a really hard ask. But I said at my first AGM that I believed that Falkirk could be the next, and the second bracket is 6. So after Celtic, Rangers, Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen, Dundee United, I said I felt Falkirk could be the next best in that group. I'd always believed that, the size of the club. I'd always believed that watching the club growing up. So for me, that was what I believed we could do. But I will go back to it. I didn't expect to do it in the manner and in the style and in the fashion that we've achieved it. But it was absolutely to get Falkirk back to the Scottish Premiership. It was to restart the academy. It was to, we've not achieved the next couple yet, but it was to win a cup. Or hopefully going to do it this year, and to get to Europe as well. I think all of those things, as well as building that 4 stand, is something that is a real key objective as well. So I wanted to achieve all of that. Thankfully, we've managed to achieve some, but there is still some big challenges ahead to try and achieve the next number of objectives.
Well, that must have given you a bit of satisfaction then when you obviously sealed the top 6 this year. Obviously, your crystal ball was working.
Yeah. I think I've always said the same about that potential top 6, which is, on paper, those top 6 teams should pretty much always be the top 6 because they've got the biggest budgets. But every single season, there's at least 1 or 2 of those clubs don't perform as well as they should. So there's almost every year at least 1 or 2 spaces in that top 6. And as I said earlier on, I think we've proven ourselves to be a very, very capable top 6 side. We've not just kind of got there by default or fell over the line. We've got there having played good football, having taken points off teams in the top 6, and having been, I think, one of the best teams to watch this season. I think most neutrals would say we're one of the better sides to watch in the Scottish Premiership. We've done it with Scottish players, which is, and sadly, it's a bit abnormal in the Scottish Premiership to have a team of Scottish players.
Certainly is. I mean, and certainly the scouting goes far and wide, doesn't it? I mean, especially when it's going down to the universities with great success.
Yeah, there's maybe not too many Barney Stewarts out there in the world, but certainly we're delighted we managed to get Barney, and Keelan Adams as well, another one that came from the lower league, who's also done very, very well. And massive credit must go to John and Paul for the recruitment, but also Alan Fraser, our head scout, a lot of the players that have came up from down south, because we've done a lot of work and homework down there. And as you say, we've managed to pick a couple of James as well.
You've just touched on some of the players you've taken on loan from down south. I mean, obviously, there are a couple of the Swansea boys that have done really well. There's a few that have done well. But, I mean, is that down to, I mean, Alan, obviously, he had a spell down there, didn't he? And Nottingham Forest, didn't he?
Yes, Alan spent actually, he'd been at the club previously under Yogi, he'd been at the club previously under that, the kind of Martin Rennie, Paul Sheegan season that you mentioned. So he'd been at the club a couple of times, but we were delighted to get him back in because he spent probably the best part of 20 odd years working down south at a variety of clubs, Ipswich and Derby, Nottingham Forest, Huddersfield, a whole bunch of clubs. So yeah, there's a huge amount of experience down there, and we felt that he would be ideal for, if we can get back to the Scottish Premiership, we felt he would be ideal for helping us to bring young players into Falkirk at the right time. It's hard to encourage to expect a bigger club down south to give you a young player on loan if you're in the Scottish Championship or League One. It's a difficult sales process, that one, because they don't necessarily see that level as being a level that's suitable. However, as a Scottish Premiership side, we open the door to getting some of these young players, but there's a lot more goes into it than that, because we spend a lot of time down there building relationships, watching players, not just in the flesh, obviously watching video footage, etc., but we also go down and watch them in the flesh, building relationships over time. And some of the players that we've been tracking for months and months before we actually speak to the club. And hopefully the work that we've done with the young players this year, where, as you say, most of them have done really, really well at Falkirk, we would hope that would put us in a good place for getting them in the future, whether it's from the same club or from other clubs, because we've now got a track record that shows we can do very well with young players on loan.
Good. And in terms of the squad, I said, obviously the team's done really well. With success comes other interest, sort of thing. And I mean, there's a likelihood that's going to be interest in your players in the summer, but that for yourselves must be a good thing if that happens.
Yeah. Do we want to lose anybody? Absolutely not. Do we need to sell anybody? Absolutely not. However, we understand how football works, and there's always going to be an opportunity for players to potentially progress beyond Falkirk Football Club. And therefore, from our perspective, it would have to be the right deal at the right time. But if somebody gets an opportunity that's incredible for their career and the terms are right for Falkirk, then of course you've got to consider it. But we're certainly not, at this moment in time, looking to sell anybody, and hopefully we don't get any phone calls in the summer.
Hopefully you're turning your phone off. I would take it.
Yeah, that might be required.
No, obviously, there's been a lot of players done well, a lot taking the headlines. Obviously, Barney's probably with the goals, I think, Calvin Miller as well. But Barney, he's a goal scorer, and in the impact he's made in a short space of time. Obviously at Falkirk, and then going to Dunfermline on loan, and then in the Premiership, it's been remarkable, is it not?
Yeah, his numbers this season, both in the Championship and the Premiership, are absolutely incredible. For a guy that was playing the 7th tier just over a year and a bit ago, I think that's credit to Barney. Even the Dunfermline loan, we looked at that and we felt that was a really good move for him. The rivalry, putting the rivalry aside, we wanted Barney to go and play at a level where he would have a passionate, large fan base like we have. Dunfermline have a very similar fan base. We wanted him to play under a manager who would absolutely have demands on him. I think Neil Lennon certainly fits that bill in terms of demands that you'd expect a manager to place on players. And he said himself, he said, I want to go, understand the rivalry, understand that it might be hard to win the Dunfermline fans over, but I want to give it a shot. And I think that speaks volumes about his character, that he was saying, understand that, it's a challenge, but I'm going to go. So credit to him in what he did at Dunfermline. He then came back into us, and I remember his hat-trick against Hibs, and you're saying, even in that short few months, he had made further progressions to his game. And the last 3 months now, his numbers are pretty incredible for a young guy still making his way in the professional game. His numbers are brilliant.
You could go through your entire team, and there's a lot of the boys there from League One all the way up, part of the squad and that as well. Another one who's grabbing a lot of headlines is Calvin Miller. He's done really well. There's people talking about a possible Scotland call for him. But certainly on form, he should be in the equation, should he not?
For me, he should be in the squad. I wouldn't even say the equation. I go to all the Scotland games, so I'll talk as a Scotland fan here, and not as a Falkirk chief executive. We are crying out for wide players, absolutely crying out for them. Ben Doak is a major talent, and he gets Scotland fans on the edge of their seat. But we've only really got Ben Doak in terms of in that more traditional winger sense, and therefore I think we need options. I think John said it himself recently. It'd be good to have the options to go and play with wide players at the World Cup. For me, I look at Calvin's numbers. his numbers for the last 3 seasons in goals and assists are staggering. You know, and he's backed it up every year. So again, it's, he did it in League One, but he did it in the Championship. He's now doing it in the Premiership. So every single challenge he's been set, he's managed to rise to that. And for me, we've got a guy there who has now got a track record of scoring goals and assists. And for me, we should be strongly considering him to be in the next Scotland squad. And it would just give us that option, especially a wide left player as well. Give us an option for a left footer to go and, you know, put crosses in the box, get to the byline, all the things he does for us, he would do for Scotland, in the right system, in the right shape. So I think it'd be good to have him as an option for Scotland, and that's saying it as a Scotland fan. And hopefully he does get that chance.
And the good thing as well that obviously Steve Clarke has already called up Scott Bain's been involved before when he was at previous clubs, but it's good to see him as a Falkirk player in that squad.
It was. I was down in Liverpool and I was absolutely delighted to see Scott come on the park. Scott's had a great season for us and well deserved to be in that Scotland squad. Well deserved. He did very well. The 45 minutes he got, he was extremely comfortable, played out for the back very comfortably as we expect him to do. He was only really called upon to make one big save, but he made it. So Scott deserves to be in that squad. Again, I hope he's on that plane and maybe even get some minutes over in the World Cup.
Well, that's it. I mean, in terms of, you're talking about the squad. Most of your squad are sort of tied up now. You've got a lot of Scott Bain, his new contract, Leon McCann and his new contract. Is there maybe a couple left, and maybe that contract is still ongoing? Is that right?
Yeah, the majority are. There's still a couple there that you know potentially might stay on at the club. Again, we've been pretty proactive over the last few years. Every year we set a break-even budget, but every year that we then outperform the budget, we start to release more money to the management team, and you know that's what you've got to do when you're on a break-even budget. You've got to set it at the start, but every year the guys have continued to perform in the league and in cups, and every year we've been able to then release more money. And as soon as we get the opportunity to do that, John and Paul and myself work hard at then trying to get these players signed on to longer contracts. And I think it says a lot that the players want to remain at the football club. The players are really keen to remain at the club, and we've now got players that have been here for 5, 6, 7 years now, and we're getting multiple players now that will be, you know, I'm not saying quite testimonial, but they're getting to the point where they'll by the time they finish at the club, they'll be at the club for multiple years. Again, you don't get that in football very much these days, and I think that's hopefully a sign of how much they enjoy being at Falkirk Football Club. Because if not, they would move on. So it's ongoing, that work, but thankfully we've managed to get a lot of the guys secured for the next 2 to 3 years.
You're talking about testimonials, but I think you're obviously being in the top 6, safeguarded your Premiership status. It's probably allowed you to do a bit of business early as well, as you've shown with the pre-contract signing of bringing Craig Sybil back to the club come the summer.
Yeah, bringing Craig back's I think a fantastic one for us. He was a brilliant football player for Falkirk in his first spell. A real talent. I think he's been really good for Dundee United the last few seasons. Games, not just games we've played against Dundee United, but actually watching him for Dundee United in other games. I think he's been one of their better players on a lot of occasions. He fits. I think he'll absolutely love playing under John and Paul because he's a football player. He wants to go and get on the ball. He wants to go and play on the front foot. He wants to go and make things, you know, be creative in that final third as well, and he can score goals. I think that will suit him playing under John and Paul really well. And the fans, you've seen the reaction from the Falkirk supporters. He's already a hero. And I think the best thing for us, the most pleasing thing for me, was he was desperate to come back as well. He was desperate to come back to Falkirk Football Club. And yeah, if he does the next 3 years, then he would be due a testimonial. So we might, for the first time in a long time, be looking at a Falkirk player getting a testimonial in a few years.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. In terms of other things and away from the sort of football side of it, obviously you'll have to replace the artificial surface. How are the plans for that coming along?
Yes, this is maybe where the fan ownership part becomes a wee bit of a challenge in that we've got to fund that ourselves. So if you are in a club who has a multi-millionaire owner, the likelihood is that you're doing some form of agreement for a loan, a soft loan, maybe some more equity, and you're getting that funded. We don't have that option, so we need to fund that roughly £1.2 million development ourselves, but also need to start to develop a training ground. So you're probably looking at year one, 1.5 or 1.6 million, which is not this summer, the next summer. Now, to generate that on top of the normal commercial incomes at a football club is incredibly hard. Incredibly hard. Most clubs are losing money. we've got to not only break even, we've then got to generate a surplus to then help to put that into the pitch fund. So we will, that does take everybody putting their shoulder to the wheel. It does take, going beyond your normal things that you do to sell, to create a separate pitch fund to see how you finance that. So the work's already underway, but that is a big challenge for us. There's no doubt that's a big challenge. It's one of the reasons as well that we are actively working on having a minority investor come in, someone that can come into the football club at maybe 25 to 33% and actually complement fan ownership. So we don't want to hand the keys to somebody. We've worked so hard to get this club in this position. Handing the keys to somebody now would be a major risk for a start, but would also kind of undo the good work that Falkirk fans have all done to get us here. So if we can find a minority investor, that would help with these type of projects, because then you've got somebody that's maybe got access to a bit more funding that allows you to come up with, as I say, an agreement to help fund a training ground, a hybrid pitch, etc. But the work's already underway. We will try our best to put in the very best quality pitch as well. I think that's important to say. We don't want to cut corners. When we put a pitch in, we want it to be the absolute best quality that we can get, because we do look around every year, and this isn't a sly dig at other Premiership clubs, but every single year there's pitches that fail miserably. It's not one club, it's not one season, it's every season, it's different clubs. We don't want to end up with a pitch that's a poor quality pitch, that's visually and its playability is below the standard required. We want to have a pitch that people go, by the way, Falkirk Stadium is a great place to play football, both because of the atmosphere, but also because they've got a really good surface. So that's a challenge, but it's one that we're embracing.
In terms of are there any talks in the pipeline? I'm not asking you to give names away, with potential investors.
Yeah, we've had a lot of interest. You can probably imagine when we were down at our lowest ebb, we had the vultures were probably circling. I think it's safe to say we had several notes of interest, and we very quickly on most occasions decided that there wasn't really any point in having prolonged conversations. It's different now because we're in a much stronger place in terms of where the club is, obviously on and off the park. I think that makes us far more attractive as well, but it means that we can be very, very selective with regards to who we bring in. We've not worked so hard to just bring anybody in now that then upsets the work we've done. So we have got some ongoing conversations, and if and when we get to a point where we really believe we've got a suitable investor, one that's going to not only agree with the valuation that we have for the club, but also willing to add value to the club. We don't just, money's good, but we want somebody that's going to come in and actually complement the work that we're doing. So once we find that person, we'll go to our shareholders and we'll propose that person at the time. But what we certainly won't do is bring somebody to the table that we don't believe is going to better Falkirk Football Club short, medium and long term. So that's another exciting piece of work that's ongoing in the background, and it could really make a difference to us if we can get that model to work with fan ownership and a minority investor. I think we've got the best of both worlds.
I mean, you spoke on it before that you've got a lot of assets now on the playing side as well, and you've said obviously that you wouldn't be sold unless the price is right and it's agreeable for yourself, the player. I mean, so that you've got no pressure on that side with what's coming further down the line to try and have to sell players in terms of funding pitches and training grounds, etc.
Yeah, no, I can safely say that we won't be selling a player to fund the pitch. We've thankfully got the club in a good place now with regards to monies that we're generating. We have got a plan for the pitch fund. We have agreed certain things with SPFL where we can draw money down early if we need to from our own money, not additional monies obviously, but we have a plan that will allow us to fund that pitch without needing to sell a player, and that's why, as I say, we're quite happy to not sell anybody this summer and to work, to build on what we've done this year and hopefully go into next year even stronger.
Can we get the crystal ball again then? In an ideal world, when would you hope to see the training facility, and when after that the full stand?
This training facility will really need at least phase one of that developed for not this summer, the following summer, because we're going to grass. So the moment we train on the pitch at the stadium, clearly that's not an option in just over a year's time. So that's really got quite quite a kind of strict deadline on it, and we're working on that one. Fourth stand is a much bigger beast. These days, the actual construction costs alone are huge. I mean, absolutely huge. Even for a kind of moderate development for a couple of thousand seats and some hospitality and conferencing and event space, you could be looking at 12 to 15 million pounds. So it's a huge amount of money. That's partly because just the market, just where construction industry market is just now, partly because the area that the Falkirk Stadium is built in is called the Bog. It's called the Bog for a reason. It is wet. It is soft. So we have to do a lot of piling. We have to probably pile down 25 to 30 metres in piling. So you've got probably a £2 to £3 million cost before you see anything above the ground. So that creates a huge challenge. And again, it's probably about the timing. Again, if we can get an investor in, if the club can continue to do well, both on the park and off the park, then at some point there might be the opportunity to commit to the financing to get that fourth stand. That would be a game changer for the club. At the moment, we are sold out. We are essentially turning fans away on a regular basis. Our own fans, obviously opposition fans, only get 800 tickets, so there's a lot more we could sell should we wish to opposition fans. So we are essentially a little bit hamstrung. We're having a capacity just under 8,000. We need that to be over 10,000 to allow the club to grow. So it is an essential and a necessity going forward, but clearly the 12 to 15 million pound part is not an easy one.
A big obstacle. Hopefully smaller obstacles, but I mean, how excited are you to be going back to Hampden again as a Falkirk man this weekend? In a couple of years?
Can't wait. Absolutely can't wait. We obviously got a wee taste of it in John and Paul's first season. We at that point were a half decent League One side, I would suggest. We were reasonably good, but this time we're going back as a very good Premiership side, and I think that's a completely different situation to be in. Playing Dunfermline just makes it even more exciting and even more intense. I know for a fact that I wake up on Saturday morning with huge nerves and huge excitement at the same time, and it's one that I'm sure both sets of fans just can't wait till 12:30 on Saturday, and we'll see how it goes.
I mean, it's one that's a lot of pressure on Falkirk as the favourites going into that one.
Yeah, I think so. I think we'd probably put our own pressure on ourselves. I'm sure John and Paul would have that one regardless of who we're playing. But you're right, the bookies will have us as favourites. Premiership Cup versus Champions Cup is always going to probably be that way. But Dunfermline, you look at their recent run of form, they've been very, very good. They've already beat Hibs, they've already beat Aberdeen. So this won't be an easy game. The added rivalry just adds a bit more spice to it. But even if you look at current form, Dunfermline are doing well in the Championship, and certainly John and Paul will not underestimate them, and neither will the players.
And certainly both sets of fans have bought into this game as well. Huge ticket sales.
We're looking at over 10,000 for both fans already, so probably some more sales to go before Saturday. I think the atmosphere will be excellent. In fairness, I think both our ultras and the Dunfermline ultras are two of the best ultras in the country in terms of the noise that they create and the atmosphere that they generate. So we're going to have, it might only be half full Hampden, but I think the noise that they'll generate, even in that 20,000 tickets, I think will be pretty good, and it will showcase the rivalry. I've always said it's one of the bigger rivalries in Scotland. It's maybe not the most obvious rivalry for people who would look at it and can't quite get their head around it. But I can assure you, having been to these games over my life, I can assure you that it is incredibly intense, and both sets of supporters will be well up for it on Saturday.
The club have achieved so much in your time. Top six so far. I mean, would making a Scottish Cup final, if you could get past Dunfermline, would that be the pinnacle?
Good question. Winning it definitely would be. That would be the pinnacle, I think, of any Falkirk fan. To be honest, now the Scottish Cup 1957 was the last time, so it's been a few years. I think getting there, you're right. Fundamentally, that in itself was a big achievement, and going there as a good side, going there with a real belief that if it was St Mirren or it was Celtic, I think we would be confident against either. To be honest with you, I think we could beat either on our day. Whereas when we went to the semi-final the last time, played Inverness and lost, but I think at that point we probably knew if we did get through, we're playing against a very good Celtic side, and we were only a kind of average League One side. So I think we'd have really struggled. To this time going, if we can get past Dunfermline, I think we've got a hell of a chance.
Mm-hmm. What's been the biggest thing for you in your time at Falkirk, Jamie?
I think getting the connection with the supporters back has just been crucial. I remember I been asked when I was getting interviewed for the role, and it was a previous board at the time. However, they asked me what I felt was the biggest challenge, and it would have been easy to say getting out of League One, because at that point we'd failed 3 times already. However, I said it's a disconnect between the supporters and the club. It's the biggest disconnect I had seen in my lifetime. For me, the supporters are the football club. I mean, that literally is the definition of a football club, especially a club, a club like ourselves. It's a community club in our town. We're not a multinational, a club that goes across the world and can rely on fans from everywhere. We ultimately need to be working with our fans in our town, in our community. And I think now when you look at the numbers, the number of kids attending, the number of families attending, the fact that we are sold out for for essentially every game, that connection that we've got with the supporters is special. And it's been hard work to get it up to this point, but I think it's probably one of our biggest strengths now.
In terms of, you spoke about that connection, right? When you first came in, as you said, there was a disconnect. I mean, as part of the board and that, were you taking it in the neck in the early games, early months?
I probably avoided it a little bit. So at the time, I remember the first few months were tough. There was probably, sadly, at the time, management team were getting it. So Paul Sheeran, unfortunately, was receiving it as you probably come to expect in football. Not by any means saying that's acceptable, but it's fairly normal. A manager, our sporting director at the time, Gary Holt, I remember getting quite a lot of abuse at the time, which wasn't nice to see. And then it probably started to descend a little bit into our board at the time. I didn't. I suppose maybe I'd only just been in the door, and potentially fans wanted to at least see how did I perform in the role first before they made their judgments. So thankfully, I've always had a very good relationship with Falkirk supporters, and I didn't receive anything in that first one.
Yeah, good. Hopefully, fingers crossed that all goes well on Saturday. If you win, then I'm sure you'll get herograms.
When it'll just be back to the town, back to the fan zone, and just enjoy it. Just lap up a Scottish Cup final. I've been to the 3 cup finals in my lifetime. I've been to all 3. I've obviously watched us lose all 3. So to get to another one and give ourselves the chance to go one better would be pretty special. Well,
fingers crossed the result goes your way on Saturday. Jamie, thank you very much for joining us here at the Dale Record in Conversation. Very much enjoyed your chat and your inside knowledge of the club.
Yeah, Scott, thank you. Really enjoyed it as well. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much for your time. All the best for the rest of the season. And thank you for joining us in Conversation. For all the latest breaking Scottish football news, join us at dalerecord.co.uk and across all our media channels. Until next time, thank you.